Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from noobcoder.com, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about async and await in JavaScript ES8. So what async and await essentially do is to write asynchronous code but make it look more synchronous. So to get started, we're going to create a couple of promises, and that's because async and await works with promises. So I'm just going to say let a equal. And this should not be new stuff to you. If this is new stuff, I do have a video on it, so you can take a look at that. It's on promises, and then you can come back here and finish this tutorial. So basically, we're going to pretend that we're calling an external API. So we're making an async call here. So I'm just going to say some async call to external API, and we are just going to say resolve A, and we're just going to copy this 2 more times, and then we're going to change it. So B, now let's make this B, let's make this C, and this is going to resolve B, and this is going to resolve C. Okay, so now from here, what we can do is we can actually create a function. So this is not going to be a normal function. So the syntax goes as follows. I can say async function, and then here, let's give it a name, and I'm just going to name it example. And then within here, I can say something like this. I can say let result A equal await, and then we call A. So what this line is essentially saying is, I want you to wait until this promise A resolves itself. Now, this could be a little bit misleading because if you look at code like this, you think that this is synchronous code, so that this is actually blocking, but it's not. So if I was to give more examples, let me just copy this. And let's just execute A, B, and C. So I have this promise being called, this promise being called. And now let's actually print this out. So I could say result A, result B, and then result C. So now let's actually execute this. And you would just execute this like a normal function. So I'm just going to call example. So now if I save this and now head over to Chrome, execute it, you can see that all our promises resolve A, B, and C. So looking back at this, the way that you should read this is result A is going to execute first. Once this line gets completed, promise B will get executed, and it's going to wait until this resolves, and then promise C will get executed, and then it will get resolved, and then finally you get our printout. Now this is fine and dandy, but what happens, and this is good if you use promises and you chain them. So you can imagine A being called, and then you use the then, you return B, and then you chain the then, and you keep chaining. But let's say promise A and promise B and promise C have nothing to do with each other. So basically promise B on this line is waiting for promise A to resolve, and promise C is waiting for both A and B to resolve. So this is a bit wasteful. Let's say they have these asynchronous calls have nothing to do with each other. So you want to execute it in parallel. Well, one way you could do it is actually remove the await, and on the next line I could do something like this. I could say let results, and we could just say promise dot all, which you should be familiar with, and we're just going to pass in our promises. So let's have result A, result B, and result C. So should probably be a capital. Let's add a semicolon here. And instead of just having it say let result equal promise.all, we have to include the keyword await. So now I can just copy this, paste this here, save it, head over to Chrome, execute it, and you can see that we get the same result. Now the only difference between our previous example and this example is that all of these asynchronous calls now are being ran in parallel. So if you remember, promise.all does the same thing, but when we add the await, it just allows us to write this more synchronously, and we can say, hey, I want you to execute all these promises parallel to each other instead of waiting for one promise to resolve and then executing the next promise. So now that we took a look at a couple examples, you might be wondering, okay, so I could write asynchronous code more synchronously, and it looks pretty nice, but what happens if there's an error? What happens if promise B is making a call to external API and the server's down, or something went wrong? So how do I do error handling? Well, let's actually simulate this. So instead of resolve and B, we're gonna say reject, and we're gonna say something went wrong. So in order to do error handling using async and await, you would basically have to wrap your code in a try block. So I'm just gonna type try, and let's copy all this, paste this here. Let's tab it. And then here I could say catch, and catch is where our error is going to be caught, obviously. So if I copy this, so now if I just type error, hit save, head over to Chrome, and now execute this, you can see that our error gets caught within our try catch block. And obviously within our catch block, you can say if error equals blah blah blah, do something. And that's basically how you would handle errors within using async and await